welcome back to another episode of MS eDiscovery in Focus. For those that are new here, my name is Ryan John Murphy. I am a compliance TS here in the UK. I'm also a data security champion here in the UK, and I'm a Microsoft eDiscovery advocate. And as always, I'm joined by Heather. Hey, Heather.
Hey, Ryan. I'm Heather Ekman. I'm a compliance technical specialist in the US and California. I have over 15 years of eDiscovery experience, a certified eDiscovery specialist, and I've been an advocate in using Purview eDiscovery for quite a few years.
Happy days, and that leads us right into today's episode. So today's episode is going to be the second episode based on the search and keyword query language. There'll probably be another couple of episodes based on this. But before we get into it today, we just wanted to bring to your attention a couple of important things that we think is relevant that you may have missed from my newsletter, which I'll introduce you to today. Well, mine and Heather's newsletter, I should say, which we'll introduce today. But first and foremost, we wanted to let you all know that Heather and I have written a Microsoft eDiscovery in-depth book, and we're hoping to get this done and dusted before the end of September this year. It will have to go through publication, of course, and then put into print. So we're really hoping that this gives you everything that you need beyond this podcast, and it's a lot more in depth on this podcast because obviously we can put it in written format rather than video and audio. So please do come into Amazon, make sure you pre-order that. If you've got any questions on it, please do feel free to reach out to myself and Heather. Next in line is Heather and I, as I mentioned, we have this newsletter on LinkedIn, essentially called MS eDiscovery Newsletter. Now, we've put together the latest eDiscovery news and tips for April. Okay, now one of those main aspects has to be the classic retirement blog. Now, this is essentially letting you know about the classic retirement, so the retirement of the classic version. Okay, now we just deep dive into that just a little bit more. Amazing blog here from Stephanie Beer and Stephanie's team. So I really highly recommend that you give this a read. Heather and I will include it into the actual into the bio of the YouTube channel and Spotify. But just to highlight here, I'm just going to read this out so everybody can read, whoever's listening, sorry, can gain benefit from it as well. Is the classic eDiscovery content search solution will be streamlined into the new unified Purview eDiscovery experience effective for May 26. So it's May 26th of this year. The content search solution will no longer be available in the classic Purview portal. To reiterate, content search will no longer be available in the classic portal after May 26th of this year. This is being recorded on the 1st of May. So in 25 days, that will go away. Heather and I were just discussing this, and we were absolutely aware of the fact that a lot of customers do use content search for some reasons of, quick searches or quick file searches, so on and so forth. Anything else to add on that, Heather? Not really?
No, I think, just understanding that the change is coming, the functionality is still in the new UX, UI experience. So, the big difference is when you're using the new UI experience, you're going to have to create a case. So, there's an extra step in there. And one of the big reasons why there is a change is because of that case management piece. So it's going to give you more control. It's going to give more security, more permissions around who can have access to those cases.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Heather. The second one I wanted to point out to you is the retirement of eDiscovery export PowerShell commandlets. So if you are leveraging the export commandlets, then you need to know that these will be going away for eDiscovery standard. Okay, as it states here, The remaining Purview eDiscovery PowerShell commandlets will continue to be supported after May 26. Heather and I noticed there was a bit of confusion online about this. Therefore, Stephanie and team have put this in at the bottom here to give you absolute clarity by saying Purview eDiscovery Premium on May 26, there will be no changes, absolutely no changes to the classic Purview eDiscovery Premium solution. Therefore, you can continue this until this is actually put into decommissioning, maybe towards the end of this year. Okay. So, as I'd mentioned, we will include the newsletter link, but also specifically this link around upcoming changes to Microsoft Purview eDiscovery in the bio for the YouTube channel and, of course, for the Spotify channel as well.
Yeah, and I want to mention, I don't know if you mentioned this as well. You mentioned deprecating the content search. The standard eDiscovery is also going to be deprecated for Classic, along with those export PowerShell commandlets. So again, all the functionality except for those PowerShell commandlets are available in the new UI. It should be an easy transition. But just something to be aware of since it's coming up quickly.
Yeah, good point. Well made again, Heather. And if you are using Classic, then, let us know why you're still using it. Is there anything in there that you're reliant on? Maybe we can take that back to product group or share that around the Microsoft eDiscovery community. Of course, we would encourage you to use the new UI UX. And talking of the new UI UX, let's move into today's episode. So, on the last episode, we took a look at the search queries and the condition builders that are available to you. Now, what we promised we would go through today is understanding the actual filters and conditions that you have at the top. So you've got some main categories here. So when we click on the selected button at the top here, we've got categories of build, KeyQL query. I can never get used to saying it like that.
I can't either.
Because I'm used to KQL,
KQL.
and custom query language.
What is the difference between KeyQL and KQL? Because this is something I think most users are used to the term KQL, and KeyQL is something that's recently come into the new UI. So what's the difference between the two?
I believe nothing. I believe it's simply just a wording change. I know it's a keyword change then, forgive the pun there, pun not intended at that point. Because we at Microsoft, Heather, we have KQL from a perspective of custom query language, which gives you the ability to run hunting queries in applications like Sentinel and advanced hunting and so on and so forth. And then we had a KQL, which was referenced for like keyword query language, for SharePoint, and more prolifically in our world for eDiscovery. So to remove the confusion between the two, my assumption is that they've gone with CustoQL and KeyQL to kind of separate the two out. And let me tell you, both languages could not be different, could not be anywhere different. So when you're creating something in custom query, you use a lot of objects and JSON objects. But in keyword query language, you're essentially just saying, I need you to find these against this date range, and so on and so forth, which we're going to go through today anyway. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Yep, it does.
Okay, cool. So we've got at the top here the build KeyQL query, and then we've got common conditions, conditions for Exchange Online mailboxes, and conditions for SharePoint and OneDrive sites. Now, we briefly mentioned in the last episode that given the amount of customers that we help with eDiscovery, and you said the same thing, Heather, is because we have that many conditions in the background, people get confused about what to use with what application. Now, just to take a quick look, all right, if we come into here, we can kind of see on the left-hand side as I'm scanning up here, there's a lot to choose through Heather, okay? And it's no wonder people get confused. So we have Exchange Online, okay? And then if we come down, we've got searchable email properties. And if we keep on coming down, we've got some for SharePoint on OneDrive, okay? Also these as well. And then we've got some searchable properties, we've got searchable operators as well. All of this, by the way, is described in the book with some examples, some real world examples that me and Heather have lived by. And again, going back to my earlier comment around saving off that KeyQL library in the back and never get used to saying that. I'm just going to say KQL because everybody's going to know what I'm talking about. The KQL for eDiscovery in the background of keep as many queries as you can in the background in a library. That definitely helps you out in these scenarios, especially when you're looking at these operator statements and so on and so forth. But just going back to my point, there's a lot of this in the book, isn't there, Heather, of how to use these, where to use these, and examples as well, which I find, even for myself, really exemplary.
I agree. And for everybody watching, I would love to hear the common searches that you're running, common use cases that you have. You know, these are use cases we see a lot of different use cases, searches. You're in day to day running these searches. You're in looking for that data, that needle in the haystack. So feel free to share those use cases, searches. We would love to take some of those examples and kind of build them out, put them in the book, or whatever, to get that information out to everyone.
Yeah, it's a very good idea, actually, Heather. And I think the MS eDiscovery group that we have on LinkedIn as well, leverage that. So if you're running a couple of queries and you may be running into some issues with those queries, or you think you've got an amazing query to go and get a certain set of data. I know here in Europe, a lot of customers, they're trying to figure out how to run subject right requests with eDiscovery. I have a few queries here. I'm more than happy to share them out. You just give Heather and I a shout on the group or in the bio of YouTube with the comments. The group would be better, to be fair, because we don't really check the YouTube channel that much unless we're posting. So whatever you've got, if you think you've got a stellar one, share it. We'll share it around. We'll obviously give you contributor rights to that. Shout out for that as well. But back to the point here, Heather, I think, it's no wonder people will come in here and be like, okay, but I'm looking for a number of things. So I need a number of conditions, or can I use a single condition? And then we get into the item types as well, which is around these values here also. Now, again, I will share these two links in the bio, but they're a bit of a read. Nevertheless, if you've got a bit of a complex situation on your hand and you really need to be really refined on what you're looking for, then Heather and I are massive advocates of ensuring that that query gives you the relevant data in the background. And I'm sure everybody watching and listening follows that mantra, because the amount of times we see customers using specific queries or using a query that they've built, not really bringing back the right data, is simply the fact that they've either targeted the wrong data set or item class or type, or they're using condition contains or using condition equals instead of being a little bit variable with them in the beginning. But nevertheless, let's have a deep dive into them and let's understand why they split them out. So you've got all at the top here, okay? Now you can use this filter here to understand which you've got on the right hand side, but essentially it's just what you've got on the left hand side here. All right. So all of them is all 28. So as you can see here, you've got the build KQL query, you've got the common conditions, and if I scroll down, you've got your Exchange, and then you've got your SharePoint and OneDrive. So if you want them all in one place, because you're not really sure what you want to, sorry, you are sure about what you want to click and collect, then you can just come down here and start mapping them out. If you're not, of course, my favorite one is always going to be gravitating towards the KeyQL query. I personally, like yourself, Ever, and probably most of the people watching or listening, will gravitate to this straight away. Pretty comfortable with what I'm building out. And if there is an error in there, then the system does a good job of telling you what that error is, essentially. What it won't do, of course, is ensure that your query is accurate enough for you to discover the data in the background based on the data set and the participants or sender recipient. That's where experience comes in, based on what I said before about maybe the equals is or the condition contains is. Either do you see a lot of that confusion?
I do. I definitely do. And I think once you, get more comfortable with searching through, these different properties, using the condition builder, it becomes a lot easier to use KeyQL. And that's typically what I gravitate towards. But I do find some confusion around the conditions, what conditions to use when, what operators to use. This is Purview is a little different than what a lot of people are used to in the traditional downstream eDiscovery tools. So, like that article that you were sharing, a lot of times I'll keep that up if I'm running searches just to refer to it because I can't keep all of that in my head. It just gets overwritten in my brain and just double check against that. And sometimes at the beginning when you're learning all of these operators, all of the different conditions, sometimes it takes like just some experimenting and to see what you get. But once you get used to it, I think it typically becomes pretty easy and streamlined, especially if you're running a lot of common searches, like you said, like data subject requests or investigations. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take a look through these then. So on the common ones here, I'm just going to flip over onto the left-hand side. So we've got keywords. I'm sure everybody understands what that keywords is. It's essentially you just looking for a particular phrase or terms in documents, emails, and Teams chats, etc. This is always something I find at the beginning of a query, Heather. I'm sure you're the same. Now, I must say as well, Heather, Microsoft have kind of mapped this out in an order of to build your query out as well. So you probably remember back from writing the eDiscovery Ninja Guide that, even using the keywords first is a good thing, and then your date range, and then the sender or author, and then the size, and so on and so forth. So these are not just here randomly thrown in here. These are in here in a particular way that you can take advantage of to build them out. So if you want to do keywords, date, subject and title, identifier, whatever the case may be, then you can go and do that and then understand and know yourself and building it out in the right manner. Date, again, is something that you can do date from, date to, date in between, so on and so forth. And I'm sure everybody understands the date aspect of it. Sender author. Now, this in itself, I think, coupled with subject or title, Heather, is again where I see some people get confused with what's in Exchange as a sender. So when I come back up to here, so you've got sender or author, person who sent an email, chat, or authored a document. Now, more often than not, specifically over here in Europe on the subject right request, but also the way we do the litigation over here is I want to know if that user's not just sent an email. I'll want to know if they're an author of a chat or a sender of a chat or an author of a document and so on and so forth. So logically in my mind, subconsciously, I always gravitate to sender or author because I want to cover off both aspects. Do you do the same thing?
I don't. And I think this is just my maybe old school eDiscovery brain. I typically will break out sender and author as two separate pieces of my search. I don't really have a good reason for that other than the fact that I like to organize, like I want, all of my search
Me
criteria
too.
for my email, all of my search criteria for my OneDrive. So, and depending on, what I'm looking for, the specifics around the case, sometimes I'll even create separate searches. So I'll do a search for email, a search for OneDrive SharePoint, a search for Teams. And I think for me, it just helps with the analysis. If I need like a search term report or something, that's my personal preference from a technical standpoint, what you're talking about. I totally get it. And, I think it's a matter of preference. And, subject rights requests are really common for you. They're becoming more and more common for us over here. So that's a great use case that I think we'll see more and more here. So, again, I think it's a matter of preference and how you want to break up your searches. So
Yeah,
one
yeah.
thing, just going back with
Yeah, of course.
keywords that I do want to mention is keywords is going to search the content of the document as well as metadata or properties. So just something to realize that when we talk keywords, sometimes people will, call it body, content. It's searching everything that's indexed for the document.
Yeah, that's a very good point, which I missed initially. So thanks for bringing that up. And I guess that goes with anything that we're searching for. Where it be litigation, you want to ensure you've got all of that content, regardless of where that is actually hosted from or the data set is aligned. And the same with subject right request for anybody in EMEA or moreover into North America, where you're actually starting to see them become more of a request. Yeah, so from sender and author, we've got sizing bytes as well. So if you're looking for a particular size of file or email, something that's navigating around your environment that you've got the specifics on, I guess, Heather, this is where this comes in. Now, I personally, Heather, over the years that I've been doing this, I've only ever seen this used once. And it's because a user had a document that they found on a site that they sent around to people, not knowing that they shouldn't have sent it around to people. So what we essentially did is we basically just ran this search to see who had actually collected this via the email or saved it into the OneDrive. And we actually just ran a pretty complex script in the background just to purge an item away from those locations. I've not seen this used before. What about you?
I haven't, however, I'm in financial services, so we deal a lot with PDFs, Excel files, our standard Office files. I could see this being used maybe if you're dealing a lot with like construction or manufacturing, where you have a lot of like blueprints or AutoCAD or just really, really large files where you may want to limit if they're not part of your investigation or litigation, where you can limit by size. Maybe also the other way where you would want to limit, smaller files that are going to kind of be junk files. Again, I haven't seen it used a lot. Those are some use cases that are possibilities, but I think for a lot of people, especially when they're searching at this point, they just want to get everything that meets the search parameters regardless of size. And maybe that's another use case is, you run a search without that size, you find out that you've got a lot of these large like AutoCAD files that are not relevant. You come in and put that size in there before you send it to a review set.
Yeah, that's a great example. And you can also put in there, can't you, Heather, size equals over 1024. So if you're getting size files that are like a gigabyte, like you said, more of those CAD and artifact files can be, 15, 20 gigabytes inside. Think of a football stadium, for example, and the construction of that. So that's a really good example. So if you are in that position, you can say is less than this size, you can say is equals this size, or you can say don't show me anything over this size if you use the not statement before the size and then the bytes of the actual file itself. Going back to subject to title, subject line of emails and or documents. Again, this is something that I use in couple with sender author on my side, Heather, is because I want to know, regardless of that subject, when it comes to the email or the title of the document, I want that brought back in the same review set because, or my customers want that be brought back in the same review set because, like you, they have the mindset of if I have one large review set where I can filter out everything and push anything out into like a master review set in the background. But I think the way you do it, which is also a good way, of course, is to do, I'm going to search everything in Teams with one search. So I've got my non-custodial sources, custodial sources from my Teams. Then I'm going to run my non-custodial sources with SharePoint, but then I'm going to run one with my mailboxes as well. That way gives you a more granular way to use the sender versus sender and author, or use subject versus subject and title, I think. Next up, we've got retention labels. So relatively new with the new UI UX. This for me, I think, Heather, is a good one because there are going to be times where customers do want to search for specifics in their environment. So we'll come on to sensitivity labels later on. But this has been a bit of an ask on my end, specifically in the financial services where I've come from as well, is the fact that okay, we know we have the Sec 17A types of information that have been labeled with this particular retention label, and let's call it Sec 17A label. You can then go through and collect anything that's been classified with that retention label. That's a good advancement for me, I think.
I agree. And if you have your retention label set up based on whatever your retention schedule is, inside of your organization, this may help just find that data a little easier. When we talk about and get to the point of sensitivity labels, I'm a really big fan. I haven't seen it done a lot, but I'm a really big fan of advocating for understanding what those sensitivity labels are, what the retention labels are, your overall data governance policy, and using that as part of your searching. Because, like I mentioned in the last episode, I think beyond finding the needle in the haystack at this point, one of the biggest kind of goals with using Purview eDiscovery is really that data minimization. You want to target and get the most relevant data, and you want to be able to filter out not just junk, but sensitive information that you don't want leaving your organization to go to outside counsel or a downstream processing vendor. So I really like retention labels. I think it's great. And I think it just brings in the overall platform of Purview where we're integrating all of the different tools.
Yeah, very well put. And I think that's a great way to put it. And one thing where you were talking there as well, where I've seen the benefit of this, Heather, is, and this is more of a technical aspect for anybody listening, is what you can do is you can say once a sensitivity label is applied to a document, you can auto apply that retention label in the background. So for one of my customers, they have a specific retention label for all of their top secret data. And then what they do in the background, they apply a specific label, retention label to that as well. So they're coupled together. So now, like you've just said, you can say where sensitivity label equals, and then the sensitivity label top secret, and where retention label equals top secret. Going back to your example there, you can really refine that data right down at the search point, not within the review set, which obviously makes the review set a lot more easier to review.
Exactly. And, I would be interested to hear from our subscribers, people that are watching this for the first time. Are you using retention labels, sensitivity labels? A lot of organizations are, and what I have found is the eDiscovery folks don't necessarily know how those sensitivity labels are being used, how the retention labels are being used. Let us know if it's something you're interested in us maybe doing an episode on, how those retention labels and sensitivity labels can be used in eDiscovery, and how you can leverage them and get the best benefit from them.
Yeah, absolutely. Just give us a shout. Created and last modified. Now, I'm sure these speak for themselves, but this is essentially just saying whenever the message was created or imported, or an item was created, and the same with last modified, a date a message was last edited or an item was updated. These really depend on, and I've seen a real mix on these, Heather, of where these been used, but more of the larger litigations when you're really starting to understand the impact of a particular breach or impact of a particular litigation case that you're working on. These really come into effect further down the line, from my experiences. And then when people start understanding, oh, okay, so it's around this date that this happened, or Heather created it and then Ryan modified it after the fact. This is where these can come in and be really helpful.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time on this here. I think we can talk about this on a later episode. But one thing that I do want to mention with date created and date last modified is, if you come from the traditional eDiscovery world like I do, where we would do a forensic collection of data, or somebody would just export a PST and there might be some attachments in there. Created and last modified was something that was really easy to understand. When someone created a document, when someone went in, accessed that document and made changes to it. Now that we're in this cloud world with SharePoint and OneDrive, it is a completely different world. So really understanding what created and last modified means, I think, is important because somebody might be creating a document and then they upload it to OneDrive. Last modified, there's different properties from SharePoint that goes into that. And I think that's something that we can probably do a whole episode on, and probably will, but just understand that when you're looking at created and last modified, there's some nuances to it that didn't exist in like the on-premise collection world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't deal with eDiscovery at all in that in those times. I am very much within the Microsoft space. So yeah, we will definitely do a deep dive on that at some point, Heather. And most of these on here as well. So if there's anybody, who wants to see, more of a deep dive on searching and the types of criteria that we can search for, or even filter out in the review set as well, Heather. We're all ears. Just give us a shout, give us a link in the bio. I'll share the email address for for Heather and I for the channel as well. We'd love to hear from you on that aspect. Identifier. So this is a relatively new one as well, Heather. I think this in itself was broken into a couple of other conditions prior, which I think memory serves me right was document link or path, and is now just under identifier, where you can do the all important and very much requested message ID. So if you've got a message ID from a email or a Teams conversation or whatever the case may be, you can literally come in here now and look for that. My favorite bit as well is the path or link from the site items, whereas there is a path to a site or a library on that site where you've got of interest, rather than bringing the whole site back. You can essentially just say, I know it's this site, Heather, but I just want to basically look in this library of that site. Or if you want to take it a step further, you've got the site, you've got the library, and you've actually got the file name as well. The identifier now gives you that option.
And what I found when I was in-house running searches like this, I used that doc link a lot. And that's one that it was always overwritten in my brain. So I would have to look it up every single time. It wasn't a hard search to run by any means, but I would always have to look it up. But what I would find a lot of times is, there would be documents that were, subject to a request of some sort. And, IT or someone would just tell a person, well, just make a copy of these files in a folder on your OneDrive, and we'll just grab that folder and process that folder. And there was some training there to get them to understand that that might not be the best way, but sometimes we would just have to go with that and collect that folder on OneDrive. And this is the perfect use case for that. So this is one that I'm excited about as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think there's an item in the roadmap as well, which I'll share, where there's another condition coming in around this. And I think this is for the message header, if memory
I think
serves
you're
me
right.
right. Yeah, message header. So you'll have the opportunity to take that message header and then map it into the identifier, where essentially just go off and find everything that maps back to that message header as it does with the message ID itself. Content kind. Now, this is one of my favorite ones, and I'm surprised at how many people don't use this, Heather, or use it in a way where they'd say, I want to bring back, just emails or just Teams messages and so on and so forth. And my first response there was, don't use it at all. And then what they'll do is they'll go into the review set and filter out all the documents. Instead of just saying content type kind equals emails and Teams messages, and potentially, if you're not really sure what you're looking for, if it's in an email or a Teams message, but you definitely don't want documents, saying not content type documents,
Yep. And I will admit, I was one of those people where I did not use this. I just put it in a review set, and then I'd go into the review set and filter by kind. And I don't know why I did it. It's just how I started out. And then, yeah, I came to the realization that I was wasting time
Yeah,
by, doing that and processing those documents that I didn't need. So I started putting that in my searches in the search page here. So
yeah,
definitely, and I think, might be a little different for like larger litigations, but definitely like investigations where you might be looking for, very targeted data. You get it a lot. I just want to see email, or I just want to see, Teams messages. Uh, this is a great way to target that. There are other ways for sure, but this is right here on the common page, really easy to get to and use.
absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I encourage anybody, if you're looking for specific content types, come here and map this out and then look for them. Or if you're not, like I said before, you know it's in an email or Teams message, but you don't want the documents, then just use not content kind equals documents. That'll definitely save you time, as Heather found out the hard way within the review set.
I don't learn anything the easy way. So I can tell you the long way to do it. And when we talk about, giving some search examples in the book and, walking through some, best practices, a lot of it is because I found out by doing it the hard way and then realizing that I was doing it the hard way and there was an easier way. So it's
Absolutely.
it's not just what we have been told for me, it's actually been going through some of that pain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the last one to go through on this episode is the content source application. So this again is very new here, but I actually really like this. And I was literally helping a customer out this morning, I think, or yesterday, based on finding information from Microsoft Forms and from Microsoft Yammer in two different searches. And using the content source application, where it states application for which the content originates, really narrowed down that search, because what they were trying to do is they were trying to understand the construction of that modality in the background, like Microsoft Forms or Yammer, which essentially just uses SharePoint and Teams and a whole ream of stuff like Microsoft Groups and stuff in the background, Heather. So what they was doing is they went and created a sample Microsoft Forms, and they were trying to figure out, well, so what is this modality made up of? And I was like, dude, you do know that you can just go into Common and go to content source application and then select that source application, and it will bring you everything back for that source application between the date range that you're looking for. And he was like, so I just spent half a day for nothing. I said, well, it's a learning curve. So now you understand that the modalities are already made up of it, which is good. And, me and you are big advocates of saying this, Heather, and we absolutely make it abundantly clear in the book is, if you do not understand your data landscape within Microsoft 365, it's going to be very hard for you to really narrow down and craft those queries to get that relevant data in the background. So if you're looking for something that's specific to a content within a modality or the source application that it states in here, this is here for you. Please, please, please take advantage of this. This will really save you some time.
Yeah, this is great. Anybody that has had to, collect forms or some of those other, I want to say non-standard, but outside of Word, PowerPoint, Excel, this is really helpful.
Yeah,
So, and will
absolutely.
save you a lot of time. But I do agree, this does not replace understanding your data landscape, or how the applications actually work, how they store data. All of that is extremely important. And I don't know if I've said it before, but part of being an M365 eDiscovery expert is also being an expert in all of the different data types and locations as well that it touches. So,
Yes.
um, which I find a lot of fun, but
Yeah.
not everyone does.
No, absolutely. And I've spoken to customers who are very new to the Microsoft world. They've come from a world like you have, Heather, where it's been really structured for on-premise or even legacy, actual documentation. And they've took a new venture on. They've come into a new company that is using Microsoft eDiscovery, and they're like, what do you mean by Teams infrastructure? What do you mean? What is Yammer? What is Flow? And so on, so forms, so on and so forth. So This is really detailed in the book, and this is one of the reasons why Heather and I really wanted to write this, because we wanted to share our experiences and give you something back. So lastly, now before we wrap up, is that content source application there is for you. Now, one thing I did notice, Heather, is that also gives you system files as well. And we are going to do an episode on denisting those system files so you can really concentrate just on the raw content of what you actually need via that litigation or via that subject right request. That will be a further episode down the line. But for the next episode, we're going to go through Exchange, and then the following episode after that, we're going to go through SharePoint. But what we are going to do is we're actually going to start to build and craft some of these queries out. I'm going to bring some of the most frequently used ones from my end. Heather's going to bring some of the frequently used ones from her end. And as Heather mentioned before, if you've got any yourself that you feel like you'd like to throw up, we'll obviously give you the shout out for it. Then let us know. You know, if it's something works for you and you've been really good at getting it out of eDiscovery, let us know. For me personally, I think the work that I've done, I'm very good at getting the whole team's information of the invite, who joined the call and how long for, the transcript and the recording, all pulled back within one simple query. I'm not going to share that right now, but I am going to share it in an upcoming episode. So thanks
keep
again.
watching, because I know that's going to be one that a lot of people will want to see.
Oh, for sure.
So that will be a great one. And I think it'll be interesting to see, you over in the UK, and the common searches you run, the common searches I run over here. And one thing that I'm starting to see pop up is eDiscovery people or small eDiscovery teams that are attached to the SOC and are focused on collecting data and investigations specifically for data breaches or security incidents. And those searches are going to be even different. So, I think it will be interesting to see all the different types of searches that we run into in different scenarios and different parts of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one caveat, we mentioned this in the last episode, is if you are sharing your queries, do let me know where you're from, because if I take them and add them into my Notepad++, I'm going to give it speech marks and not quotes, and they don't work as well as you would expect in the actual query builder, because it's expecting the left and right quotes instead of the forward down quotes. But we'll get into that in a different episode. But thanks for joining us again. We really appreciate it. If you have liked this episode, please do give it a like and a subscribe. It helps us a lot more than you think. And we will see you in the next one. Goodbye for now.
Thank you. Bye.